Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Smart YouTube channel. I am your host, Dr. Karen Litzy. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so that you never miss a new podcast episode. So today we are kicking off 2023 with a repeat guest on the podcast, Joseph Reinke. He is a Chartered Financial Analyst, Charterholder, and is the founder of FitBux. That's FITBUX. In the past 5 years, FitBux has helped 15,000 rehab therapists manage over a $2.2 billion in debt and assets using their innovative financial planning technology. So on today's episode, we talk a little bit more about that technology, and Joe also gives us an update on the student loan situation here in the United States. So a big thank you to Joe for coming back onto the podcast and to talk about financial freedom, how we get there, why we want it, and of course, like I said, another quick update on the student loan situation here in the United States. So everyone, thanks so much for tuning in and to enjoy today's podcast episode. Hey, Joe, welcome back to the podcast. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023, right? So how are you doing?
I'm doing good. And it's crazy that you said 2023 because it was like, I went back, you said, welcome back. I went back to like the first time we were on, and I think it was like 2017, 2018. I'm like, wow, time kind of flew.
Yeah.
So,
And, the episode we did last year was right around the new year last year. And it was in the top 5 most downloaded episodes of 2022. So maybe we'll have a repeat here.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Everything from the world blown up financially to mortgages and interest rates and student loans and financial planning and everything else. So
Yes. So, and let's get into it then. I know that we're going to talk about financial freedom. So you'll have to explain to us what exactly that is.
yep.
And a student loan update, which I'm sure a lot of people with student loans, which is a lot of people out there in the world, would love a good student loan update. So I'm going to throw it over to you and let's talk about financial freedom. What is it? Why should we care?
Yeah, so this was a journey for me to come up with this, and it's based on research and even in my own life. Like when I first graduated from college, I knew investments. I've been investing since I was like 12. Like I went to the school for that, but I was also in sports. So I went to go work for the Dodgers. And my problem wasn't student loans. I only had like 10 grand student loans. My problem was I was making like 26 grand a year working in LA. And I left the Dodgers, and my financial plan was basically like quit the Dodgers, work for Wall Street, make a ton of money, like be happy, right? And that didn't really come to fruition because I turned down all my internships on Wall Street. So it was like nobody would hire me. And so I made a deal with a bank, but also had a wealth management department. And they said, look, while you're getting your CFA, which is like a 3-year study program, you can go into wealth management. And once you're done, you can transfer into our investment analytics and like basically our Wall Street team, basically. And I said, yeah, let's do this. And so when I was in wealth management, I started seeing all these people that were like 45, 50, 55 years old that had financial planners for like 15 years, and they're paying them all this money and they're nowhere near hitting their goals, and they're panicking. And I'm like, what's your goal? And one of the third goals they came up with that I kept statistics on was financial freedom. And I would ask them, well, what's financial freedom? They're like, having a lot of money so I don't have to think about it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not working for you. But that's also one of my goals. It was just to have a lot of money and not have to worry about it. So obviously I got to change something here. And so I started doing a lot of research on what is real financial freedom. And what I found out is it's not this magic number in the sky. Like a lot of people will be like, oh, you need $1 million and this horseshit 4% withdrawal rule. Like you'll have money forever. It's like, no, that isn't right. And I came up with that because when I was talking with different people that I knew or that I thought were financially free, like I would talk to people that I knew that had $1 million or $2 million, but they were nickeling and diming everything. And they were miserable financially. Like they had so much stress financially that it's like, this is not financial freedom. Like you're stressed out over money. Like, what's the difference if you don't have money and you're stressed, or you have money and you're stressed about it? Like, it's still stress. That's not free.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of that, I started talking to people that actually had a lot of money that were free. And what I found out was that, like one of them told me, you got to have intangible financial freedom before you have tangible financial freedom. And it's like, well, what is that? It's like, okay, well, you have to have an understanding. You have to be able to develop a plan and be able to implement that plan. And so that's what I began building all the research around, was those three things: understanding, planning, and implementing. And that's, basically what FitBux, that's the new technology release. It centers around all three of those things to make financial freedom easy for you to achieve from an intangible standpoint, so that way you can actually achieve it from a tangible standpoint. And so that's financial freedom to me. And it's funny because, over my years on the internet, I met a lot of these financial social media bloggers that are like financial independence, like, what is it, the FIRE movement and all this type of stuff. Like, I need this magic number. And they're always like, how come you're not hounding this on people? I'm like, because that's not financial freedom. And over the years, they've progressed to being like, I now understand what you mean. Like, that's not financial freedom. Like, just not having to worry about this and just having a system in place is financial freedom. It's like, yes. So that's the true meaning of financial freedom. You got to get it right from an intangible standpoint first before the tangible piece ever comes. Because, I mean, you can have, you can inherit, hit the lottery, have $50 million and still lose it. You're still not financially free.
And we see that all the time, right?
Literally, statistics bear that. And that's where I came up with this stuff too, is, again, being in sports. The average athlete in Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, they make more money in 3 years than the average person makes in 40 years in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But statistically, within 3 years out of the league, about 70% of them go bankrupt. You see the same thing with people that inherit money, people that are actors and actresses, people that win the lottery. That's why they talk about like the quote unquote silver spoon millionaires. There's not that many, actually. Like, to be honest with you, like, most people, I think it's something like 80 or 90% of people in this country that are worth over $1 million earned it themselves, because most people that inherit it blow it because they don't have a clue what to do. They don't understand. They don't have a plan. They don't know how to implement it.
Right. Yeah, you could just look at the Vanderbilts. If you look through the Vanderbilt history, you had, Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was by far the wealthiest person in the world. And as it went from, I think it took like maybe 2 or 3 generations, and it was almost gone.
Yeah, gone. And that's why it's funny, because it's like, I've seen interviews with Shaq where he's like, my kids won't inherit a dime. And that's why he's like, they got to earn it themselves, unless they're just gonna not figure this stuff out and they're just going to blow it. So,
right.
Yeah, it's real.
So let's break down this financial freedom plan. So you said part 1 was understanding. So can you talk a little bit more about what understanding means? What do we need to understand? And what have you seen in your experience that people don't understand?
Yeah, so there's actually a number of different things, but the number one thing that I found, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. But when people came into me and they're like, well, I have a financial plan. I'm like, okay, well, what is it? And they pull out a budget. And I'm like, no, guys, a budget is not a financial plan. A budget might actually be part of a financial plan, but it's not the financial plan. And a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean when you say that? And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, when you do a budget, most of the time it's just you putting numbers in. Okay. And then, like, if you have a budgeting app, all it's doing is saying every month you spend more than that, or this month you spent below that. That doesn't answer anything. That just tells you what you're spending. And so a lot of times when I ask people, what do you want out of a financial plan? It's like, well, I want to be able to hit XYZ goal. Like, I want to be able to save this amount for a car. I want to be able to know, should I be buying a house or should I be renting? What should I be doing with my student loan? Should I be paying them off or go for loan forgiveness? If I'm married, should me or my spouse stay at home part-time or full-time? Like, whatever it is, like, am I on track to hit retirement? Like, that's what a financial plan is. Your budgeting app doesn't do that. Like, it's not going to tell you that. And so oftentimes people would be like, oh, well, so budgeting is not important. It's like, I didn't say that. What I said is that it's not a financial plan, but it plays a part. And that part is organization. Okay. And that's where the second part people make mistakes on is, they're like, okay, like, if you go on to type in like financial planning, whatever, in Google, the first thing that all these people say is start a budget. And so that's what people do. They go into Excel, and it's just like this throw up list of numbers in Excel with formulas that are broken all over the place. And then they realize they can't do it. And so they download an app, and then it's just organized chaos on an app instead of Excel. It doesn't mean anything. And so what I've figured out through my research is like, you got to boil this down into 3 categories. Basically, there's money for today, which is your income and your expenses. And you have money for future self, which is investing or paying off debt. And then you have risk management, which is like insurances. And insurance is used to protect your financial plan. And so when you bucket it into those 3 groups, it makes the overall plan, when you go to build the plan, it makes it very easy because you have everything exactly organized. And then when you go to build a plan, you actually give everything meaning, because you're like, okay, this is going here, this is going here. And that's what I found with the budget. Most people, they build a budget, but only like 20% of them follow it because it has no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
They try to change their lifestyle overnight. And if you try to do something overnight and it just doesn't have any meaning to you, you're going to stop. Like, it doesn't mean anything. You don't see the results. And financials, that second group, money for future self, investing, paying off debt, that takes time. You don't see a result tomorrow.
No, of course not.
Right? It's not like working out where you go to the gym for a week or 2 and all of a sudden you look in the mirror, you're like, wow, I look kind of swole, like awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see those immediate results at all.
Right.
And so that's why people stop budgeting. But when you organize it correctly and you give it meaning to what you're doing, which we'll talk about, that's the fundamental piece of understanding, is understanding how to actually budget and what's the purpose behind the budget. And not just tracking numbers because somebody says you need to budget. It's like, okay.
Right.
So that's the first piece, really an understanding. That's the most important piece. Of course, there's more than that, but that's the main key piece.
Right. Right. And so understanding, and then you've got develop a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when a lot of people think about developing a plan, like you said, they're like, oh, I heard that if I want to retire, I need to have, $3 million, right? That's usually like a good roundabout number. And then I'll be able to retire. So I just have to do that. But that's not quite a plan. I don't even know that that's a goal.
No, not at all.
So go ahead and expand on that development of a plan.
Yeah. And you got to have, first of all, you got to know what your goals are, and you have to prioritize them. Say, look, my number 1 goal is buying a house. My number 1 goal is paying off loans. My number 1 goal is saving for a wedding. My number 1 goal, whatever it is, you got to make sure that you have that. And the reason why that's important is because the biggest part of a plan, like those individual components, that's what people are trying to do. And what I found, one of the biggest reasons people make mistakes is they're trying to do too much. And then it's like they're trying to, like, I get on the phone with someone, they're like, I want to pay off my student loans. I want to save for a house. I need to save for my wedding. I need to save for a car. I have my 401k. I got my Roth. We're going to have kids. So it's like, whoa, slow down. Right. And so the analogy that I give is like, if I'm trying to fly from Austin, Texas to San Jose, right, and I get on the plane, I ask a pilot, where are we flying today? He has like 1 goal, 1 focus. I am going to San Jose. Now he gets to San Jose, and maybe his next flight's to San Diego, and that's his next focus. But a pilot will never tell you, oh, well, I'm going to fly to San Jose and San Diego at the same time. Because if they did that, that means in air, the plane broke apart and crash landed in both places. Well, the same thing's with money. When you're trying to do all these different things, a little piece of you might get some retirement. A little piece of you might pay off a little bit of your mortgage. A little piece of it might pay down your debt. But the next thing you know, you're 55 or 60 and your finances have basically crashed because you never did anything to the fullest. So what I found in research, when I was telling you about people that I researched, what did they do? They focused. They said, this is my number 1 goal. That's what I'm doing. They would accomplish that, and then they would move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And there's some minimums I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, but there's minimums that you got to do. So like get your 401k match, put like $50 at least a month into a Roth IRA, like pay your minimum debt payments. And then with your leftover money, all of it goes towards that number 1 thing. And so that's why the first thing we talked about understanding the budget, that's why it's so important, is because you're like, here's my today money, here's money for my future self. here's money for risk management. When you set that up and you set up those minimums, you see exactly what's left over. And now you got to say, that's what's going to that number one goal, period. And also, if you set that up and you realize that you don't have any extra money for future self, then you can go back to your day-to-day money with your expenses. And you can say, okay, well, I need to cut some expenses so I can have some money. And instead of trying to do everything at once and just change your lifestyle, you focus. You say, look, I'm going to take one expense this month. Like I stream too much on Netflix. For this month, I'm just going to cut Netflix and not have it at all. For 40 days, that's what I'm doing. Boom, done. Okay, this month, I'm not going to go out to restaurants. And you're not worried about your investments. You're just focused on cutting that one expense. And the next thing you know, over the year, you've changed your lifestyle. You got 15, 20 grand sitting in your bank account. And now you have extra money to go do what you want. And so when it comes to the plan, the actual plan, before you start answering, well, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? It's like, well, what are your goals? And what do you need to do to like just focus on one of those things at a time? And you will end up achieving so much more financially than if you just try to do everything at one time. Plus, we talked about like it takes time to do these things. Well, if you focus on one thing, you're going to achieve it a lot faster. So you're more likely to actually achieve your financial goals versus trying to do everything at once.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And when you say to focus on one thing, is it you're focusing on one thing for that month or for that year?
If you're cutting
or
expenses,
that, yeah.
If you're cutting expenses, yes. Now, if you've already cut expenses, you got some leftover money to do like number one goal, maybe your number one goal is saving for a down payment for a house. And that's going to take you a year and a half. For a year and a half, that's what you're doing.
Got it.
Now, again, like I said, you're still getting your match in your 401k because that's like free money, right? Other debt payments like your car payment, you have to pay that. You can't just ignore it. We also say a minimum going into a Roth IRA if you're eligible, like it's because of what we call retirement income diversification. But all the extra money, you're not trying to max out your 401k. You're not trying to save for anything else. It's like, I'm saving for a down payment for a house. That is it. All right. Plus, it makes it easier too. Like when you go out to buy something, you're like, man, this is like $300. And if I just don't pay for this, like that's $300 more towards my down payment for my house. Like
right.
It gives you meaning. Again, that's the whole reason. It gives you reason to do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's
right.
that's the big part of the plan is focusing.
Okay, great. Now, the hard part. So you've got the understanding, you've developed a plan. Now you have to implement it. And this is where, I mean, we're human beings, right? We don't like to do things that we're not comfortable with a lot of change. It's hard for us to make new habits. So what is your best advice to implement a financial plan?
Yeah, well, this is where, again, focusing comes into place because I like to up level everything and make it simple. And again, we're talking about financial freedom. And so it's like, okay, when I'm implementing this, what do I need to do in terms of, do I track this? Do I track that? To me, that's too detailed right off the bat. Okay. Going back to the focusing thing there, I'm not going to go into it because it's like psychological. It's called the square root law, where it's like, if you take the square root of a population, that square root results in like 50% or more of the results of that population is because of the square root of that. Okay. And I don't, it's science, it's proven data, like all this type of stuff. But I took that law and I said, okay, again, going back to the very first thing we talked about, organizing your information. Okay. Well, if we have these three groups of money for today, money for future self, risk management, our quote unquote money population is 3. So if I take the square root of that, that's one category. Mm-hmm. So wherever the majority of my money is going, that's what I'm going to get more of in the future. And that was one of the big things I realized in my research of where people were failing is they would set up their plan in their 30s or whatever it was, 40s, in their 20s. And they might have like 60% going to day-to-day money in their expenses and only like 20% going to money for future self. And then over time, even though they got raises and everything else, they'd have what we call lifestyle creep. So by the time they're 50, they still got 60% of their money going into expenses and 20% going into money for future self. It's like, no, your only goal when you're implementing your plan is to try to switch that over time. And it's hard now, especially because of inflation and everything. But the goal is to say, okay, from a high level, when I'm implementing my plan, I might have 55 or 60% right now going to expenses and 20% going towards money for future self. But my goal is to try to get that flip-flopped as fast as I can. And it takes time. You're not going to be able to do it overnight, but it might not ever get to 50%, but that's still your goal, is to get to 50% or more going towards money for future self. Okay. And sometimes that might even be, like Karen, we've talked a lot in the past about like different types of courses and just ways to develop your, what we call human capital skills. Sometimes that's you saying, look, my asset that I'm investing in is a course because it's going to increase my income, which will allow me to invest more into that's an investment. Like that's still transitioning over into that. So from a high level, again, the simplification is, okay, what do I focus on? That's the focus, getting more than 50% of my money going to that second category. And as long as I'm trying to do that, I will hit that tangible financial freedom. Most of the time, what we see is it takes about 10 to 25 years to really hit that. We'll get there. And then from there, that's where you say, okay, well, how can I actually implement the nuts and bolts of this? I mean, that's where you have different technologies like the new one that we released, where once you say, here's my financial plan, it saves all that down on your FitBux profile, and you can link your accounts and everything. And then it tracks it to say, this is exactly how much money is going here, here, and here. And then that was my thing. You're talking about implementing it. When I was researching people, I would be like, so how long does this take you guys to do? And they're like, oh, I spend like 5 hours every Sunday doing it. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. Like, there's got to be ways for you to actually track this stuff.
Right. And that's what throws people off, because they say, oh, if I have to do, it's going to take me all this time, forget it. I don't want to do it. Or then you're going to pay someone a big, huge amount of money to do it for you.
And they don't really do it. That's the crazy part.
Right.
Like, I know a family member that was literally paying a financial advisor $30,000 a year. That financial advisor would literally look at the account for about 2 hours a year. And it was basically right before their phone calls that they had to be mandatory for a year, because everything they did was they just put it into a robo advisor on the back end and they just left it. So they don't pay for anything. And so that's why with like the tracking part of the technology we came up with, it tracks it. And some people, they go really into the detail. They want to see every single expense. Other people just say, look, I want to make sure I'm going to put in my income, and I just want to see what percentage of my money is going to that money for future self. The other stuff, as long as I'm not like negative cash flow, I can care less about day-to-day expenses. I want to know what percentage of my income is that increasing over time to that money for future self. And that's all they track. And that's good enough. If you're going now, if all of a sudden you're not putting money into your future self, yeah, you need to go back to day-to-day expenses to see why your cash flow is not there. But from a high level, I mean, that's what I do. People are like, oh, well, like, do you go down to the T, like how much you spend on this? I'm like, no, I don't care. As long as I have money going to that second category, that's what I did. That's why, first of all, I know this works, is because once I figured this out, I did it for myself. And I'm like, wow, this worked. And then I did it for family members and friends. And now we've done it for 14,000 people on FitBux. Like, yeah, it works. And so that's the key, is from a highlight level of implementing it, focusing on the key thing. And that's getting that money, that lifestyle creep, avoiding that, and getting more money to that second category. That's your ultimate goal. And then from there, your secondary goal is, hey, what is my number one thing? Do you want to save for a house? Whatever it is, that's your secondary goal.
Right.
And the third piece is can I use some type of technology where I don't have to spend 5 hours every Sunday or every week trying to track this thing?
Right. And so you have done that at FitBux. Like, that's what this technology is.
Yeah, absolutely. So
okay. So where can people find out more about this technology and its use, and if they're interested, and if they're hearing this and they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. How do I get how do I do that?
Yeah, just go to fitbux.com, sign up. Our free version of the profile, it just has like little like tools, like student loan tools and that type of stuff. And you can still talk to a coach for free. But then our premium membership, it actually has the financial planning technology, where those 3 buckets I told you about, those 3 categories, when you actually budget, that's the first thing, is setting that up so you can see where your money goes. And then you can go in and put in life events like getting married, paying off student loans, all that type of stuff. And you can simulate that, and you can see what happens over time. And you can actually build multiple plans and compare them side by side. So you're like, hey, should I go on loan forgiveness for my student loans, or should I buy a house or not, or the value of the house? You can compare them. And then once you say that's the plan I want to do, you can click implement and then link your accounts, or just do it manually. and track it over time. And then once you have the premium stuff too, you also get a designated FitBus coach. So at that time, you talk to the same person whenever you want to have a question. There's no added cost to talk to them or anything like that.
Right, right.
And so that's out there. We've been beta testing that with people for about a year and a half. And then this new version we just rolled out to the public about 2 months ago. And then we're doing another upgraded version too, where like, if you don't want to build your plan, we have an optimization one where literally you answer like 5 questions and we literally build the most optimized plan for you. And so that's rolled out, but I put a blocker on it right now because I want to tweak some of it, and that's going to be rolled out again in January. But yeah, it's there. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's exciting because, as you know, Karen, I mean,
it's been a long
slowly
time
building
coming.
this for the last 4 or 5 years.
But that's good. That's a good thing. It means you didn't just like throw everything up against the wall and see what sticks. You actually use data and like you said, over 14,000 people. So it's like you're refining this. And the thing I also like, it's like you didn't just build it and be like, okay, it's done.
Yeah, it's never going to be
fine.
done.
We're fine. And now, how much is this premium membership? Because it sounds like it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, so most of the time, like it's $45 a month, but like we have specials right now that are $18.99.
I was thinking like $200 or $300 a month.
No. That's the best part about the technology.
Nice.
It allows you to go in and do it, and you don't need to rely on a financial planner. But I know, again, from data, that when it comes to some of these big financial decisions, people still want to talk to people. That's why we have the coaches.
Yeah.
The coach is not there to build the entire plan for you, because you don't need to rely on them for that. Like the technology can show you what to do, which I'm adamant on, because when I was in the wealth management industry, the biases that I saw for product placements, because that's how they got paid, I'm like, no. So I was like, the technology is going to help you do that. The coaches are there to answer your questions and help you use the technology to answer those questions and guide you on, what to do with the tech, so that way you can get the answers and do it yourself. So yeah, again, our investors are like, you could be charging $200 a month. I'm like, nah, like we don't need to. Right now it's $18.99.
Amazing.
For the New Year special and everything.
Right. And so everyone, that's fitbux.com, and we'll have a link to it at the podcast and across social media and everything else. So now let's talk about student loan updates. I'm sure people are like waiting with bated breath to hear about these student loan updates. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, first off, people are actually starting to get upset. Like at first, when everybody was like, oh, student loan repayments on forbearance, like this is fantastic. Now people are starting to get pissed, because it's like, okay, I got to gear up to make payments. And then it's like a week before, nope, we're extending it again. So people are actually starting to get upset, because, it's kind of hard to plan.
Right.
It's like, wow, we got this much money saved. What do we do with this? Like, just sit on it for now. Like, just wait. So one, people are getting mad, but it's like, don't know what's coming down the pike. I'll start about with the forgiveness stuff first, and then some of the student loan repayment plans that are coming out. This whole 10K or 20K in forgiveness, I mean, I've said this on day one, it's never going to go through. My thing, I'm not a legal scholar or anything, but in the Heroes Act that they said that they used, one of the key things in there is that it has to show that the emergency declaration, because of the emergency, it student loans put somebody in a worse position. Okay. And that's just not the case with COVID forbearance, because since COVID hit, no payment has been due and no interest has been charged on federal loans. So at worst, people are in the same position. They're not in a worse position. And so just on that alone, it should get thrown out and say, no, this isn't doable. Legally, it's not doable. It's got to go through Congress, blah, 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 blah. Now, the problem, though, is that since it was done, you still have to find somebody that has standing to sue. So somebody has to say, I was harmed by this. And so there was 2 or 3 cases where they were legit harm, and then the Biden administration came out and made some like last minute changes to get rid of those lawsuits. But there's been 2 or 3 that have found their way to the Supreme Court. They're hearing arguments in February. Probably have some type of ruling in June, if not before that. I highly doubt that it will go through in court. I don't see it happening for multiple reasons. Will it be done sooner? I've heard some people in the legal industry say that in January, when the House of Representatives goes to the Republicans, that they will end up suing the Biden administration to start repayment again, like forcing them. And they think that they have a lot of legal standing to stand on that, because every time the Biden administration has extended the student loan pause for repayment, they've blamed COVID. In this last time they extended it, they said that they couldn't start it because the pending court case with loan forgiveness, which that has nothing to do with COVID forbearance. And so they think that they're going to go to the court. And if that's the case, and that goes to the Supreme Court, they think that they'll do a ruling on both that and forgiveness at the same time immediately. So some people are like, they're going to be doing this in February, because they view it as like the mask mandate that they did when they took that to court, and there was basically decided fast. And so there's a chance that student loan repayment starts sooner. I've been saying from day one that my gut feeling is that as long as Democrats are in the presidency, we won't have student loan repayment ever again. Because that's their ultimate goal, is free education. So however they got to do that, if it's a student loan repayment pause, they're going to do that. That's what I think is going to happen, even when this current one gets extended. Or the other big news is that Biden announced with the 10K student loan forgiveness that there's a new income dream repayment plan they're going to come out with. And this plan, I mean, it's already very generous. So most people on IDR, like if you make $60,000 a year or $48,000 a year, your monthly payments are like $200, $250 a month. So you can borrow like 300 grand. Your payments are $250 a month. Underneath this new IDR plan, that payment would drop down to like $30 a month. And so that's what's out there, but that's all the details that we've gotten. There's nothing about who qualifies, like any of that stuff. It's supposed to be rolled out in July of next year. But everybody thinks that Biden's holding off because he wants to see what's going to happen with the 10K and forgiveness. And then if it doesn't go through, that they're going to make that IDR plan even more generous.
Got it.
And that's going to be the way they backdoor the free education with no monthly payments for the bulk of people. Because they're not shy about this stuff. You have a lot of Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and all that stuff. They've said flat out, our goal is free undergrad and to transfer the payment burden to graduate students, which they by and large have done. And so, that's where we're headed as of right now. I just don't see student loan repayment coming in for a lot of this audience. The big thing is going to be, what's that new IDR plan, and can I qualify for it with my graduate loans, and should I switch to that type of plan because it saves me so much money? Can't really answer that question yet because we don't know the details.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Anything else on the student loan front?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, in terms of strategy for right now, just keep saving and pretend the payment's there. Keep putting the money in your bank account and just keep saving. And when they do kick in, that's when you implement your strategy. So earlier we talked about building out your financial plan. You're still building it out as though you're making the payments. It's just getting swept to your bank account for the time being.
Right.
That's it.
That makes sense to me. All right. Well, before we get going here, what would you like to leave the listeners with? Any words of wisdom or a wrap up from the talk today?
Yeah. Financial freedom. I mean, if you guys can get on that about understanding like how to use the budget correctly, being able to say, hey, what's the key to the plan? And it's focusing, and then saying, okay, when I implement this, the number one key is being able to say, hey, what percentage of my money is going to that money for future self? The amount of stress that takes off of you, of just knowing that simple framework and having a way to implement that to me is financial freedom. I joke around. I've been telling people I've been financially free since I'm like 23, 24 years old. And they're like, oh, you were a millionaire when you were 23, 24. I'm like, no, I didn't hit that for years after that. But I have not stressed about money since then. Once I figured this stuff out, it's like yeah, I just don't stress about money. Because I have this basic framework that I follow, and that's freedom to me. Like to me, freedom is not having to worry about money and stress. I'd rather go stress about my 5-year-old and
Right. There are
having
other
fun with
things in this
her.
world to stress. There's plenty of other things to be stressed out about. Let's take one of
Exactly.
those out of the equation. Let's take the money part out of the equation.
Exactly.
Well, Joe, thank you so much. And I know I've asked you this a million times, but I'm going to ask it again. Start out the year right. So if you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Start now. I mentioned I figured this stuff afterwards. I mean, I went through when I was like 12 or 13. My whole thing was understanding and planning and implementing and all that stuff. I didn't know it at the time, but I remember people ask me why I got so into investments. It's like, because I don't want to have to worry about money and do whatever I want to. And then, as I graduated college, you start getting into the whole rat race, and that mindset switched somehow. I don't even know how it switched. It just society and life switched it. And then once I got that wake up call, it was like, oh, wow, like, why did I need to go back to this? And so it's like, if you haven't started it yet, start. Like, your life is going to be so much better. And that's, again, going back to my future self is, I don't really care what society says anymore. Like, I'm going to go do what I know works, because that's what evidence says. That's what works. Like, so that's what I tell myself is start doing it now. I talk about that square root rule again. I don't want to go too much into it, but it's like, it applies everywhere in life. Like, if you got 9 friends, 3 of them are going to influence you. Right. So those 3 are going to be people that are going to influence you in the right direction. Because if they're not, that's part of financial freedom. You got to replace those 3 friends, like, with someone that will. I know it's tough, it's cutthroat, but it's like,
right.
If you want financial freedom and you want that push, again, it can be anything. Financial freedom, going to the gym, starting businesses, whatever it is. If those core people that are around you aren't doing, like, pushing you, you're just going to get more of the same.
Right.
So start now, start understanding these things, and get after it.
Excellent. Great advice. Where can people find you?
FitBux.com or all over Facebook. I think it's like FitBux Official. Like, we have a group on Facebook. Instagram, FitBux Official. We're there. We got some YouTube videos too on the channel. So if you guys want to check out the videos, again, it's just FitBux. Just type in FitBux in YouTube and we'll pull you up on the channel and go from there.
Excellent. And we'll have links to everything at podcast.healthywealthysmart.com in case you missed it, and all over our social media as well. So Joe, as always, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us all this great information and telling us about your great premium membership over there at fitbux.com. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Absolutely. And everyone, thanks so much for listening. Have a great couple of days and stay healthy, wealthy, and smart.